Tell your story, build your brand. artmedianorthwest.com. artmedianw.com. Now enjoy part 2 of this conversation with Paul Brown. All right, so how well does the system work for people and for musicians and for photographers?
What's the system?
The system, society, I guess.
Oh, well, God. It depends on the community that you're in and where you associate. You know, what are your aspirations? Mm-hmm. What's your goal in this thing, right? Musically, I mean, you know, one of the bands that I'm in is a tribute band, is a tribute to Dokken. And you know, when I joined this band, the guys had been doing it for a while, and you know, they needed a bass player, and I had just started playing with Bad Ellie. And, you know, they separated with their bass player, and one of my friends is in the band. And he's like, hey, I've got a guy, you know. And so they sent me a message. I'm like, sure, that sounds fun. It was one of the things, one of my main focuses photographically.
I like that. You coined
yeah,
that.
Right.
Hey, you heard it here
right?
first, folks.
One of my main subjects was tribute bands. Yeah. I had you know, I'd started going to see Joff with Western Aerial and tons of original bands, and I loved it. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, I saw Everclear before they broke, and, you know, in little cafes and stuff like that. Tons of cool stuff, right? All kinds of neat bands. I met a lot of cool people that I'm still friends with. One of them was when Joff started Ants in the Kitchen.
Right.
I met Dane, and Dane was in Stone and Love, which is tribute bands. And so I started going to Stone and Love shows, you know, and like early on, like Breakfast Club, Rad Rev shows and things like that. And so I got in these, and I realized all these people are super fun, nice. We all have the same interests. This is great. Let's do this, you know. And so I started taking my camera to shows, and the same thing. It was like, take photos, have a good time, you know, I'm at the show. That's what I want. So society and the system, I mean, if you want to look at it overall, I don't think that artist is not supported, right? I mean, there's just not support for arts, but everybody's interested in it, right? And so that's the thing. If you get rid of all of these things, well, you're going to have a lot of depressed people, right? But overall, like on a big picture or macro yeah. It's just, there's no support for arts, which sucks because, you know, when I was going to school, I had wood shop, I had auto shop, I had all these, you know, I could do all of these things. These are great. They don't have them anymore, which is really bad because for me, so I love cars. I wanted to be a car designer. That's why I studied mechanical engineering when I was going to school, you know, the whole thing. And auto shop was that thing for me, right? Yeah. It was like, you know, math, science, all this stuff. It was great. I loved it. But auto shop was that thing I looked forward to, right? It's like I went in there, I studied, I took every single auto shop I could. And, you know, I did it all the way through high school. And the instructor was an ex-engineer from Ford. So he had all kinds of cool stuff, you know? And, yeah, that was just it was the thing. And it was the escape. Music was the same thing. I didn't, throughout high school, I was too shy to join the band. And so I didn't, but it was there. My brother joined the concert band, whatever it was. He was a trumpet player. I just never joined.
That's a shame because so many of the kids in band were shy kids that, you know.
That's where we all went. I know, right?
And a lot of talented ones too.
Yeah, I just was so shy I wouldn't do it. That's super important because, like you said, that's where those shy kids go. You know, it's like, and you being open to it and finding that outlet. You know, but as a society, it's all going away because I don't know why. I really don't. But on a personal level, I've found these pockets where we all enjoy the same thing. We all support each other, you know, and you know, it's cool. Just like this podcast that you're doing. I mean, that's what it's all about. It's just, you know, on a micro level, connecting with a group or an environment or whatever it is that fulfills that, you know, so we can support each other in that sense on a small level. But yeah, overall, taking music out of schools and that kind of stuff, it's really depressing.
Yeah.
You know?
How well do schools prepare kids for the real world, in your opinion?
I don't think they do. Um, to an extent, when I was in school, I got lucky. I think I went to Tigard High School, and they still had programs. They had auto shop, and that taught me. I could build an entire car. In high school, I learned how to do that. I rebuilt an engine, I rebuilt carburetors, I rebuilt transmissions, the whole thing. In high school, I was able to do these things. And it was cool because what that meant is then now, I'm a kid, I have no money, but I have a car and I know how to work on it.
Right.
I could do something with it. The other thing that I got lucky was that they had an elective program for either mechanical engineering or architecture. And so I did 3 full years of mechanical engineering in high school, so that when I got to college, I got to challenge my first year of college.
Oh, wow.
Challenge the whole thing. I sat in the class and listened to what the syllabus was going to be about. And I'm like, oh man, I already did all this stuff. This sucks. So I went and I talked to the instructor, and he looked over all of my work that I brought in, all of my work, my blueprints, the whole thing. And, he asked me questions. He's like, man, you already know more than I'm going to teach. So you don't have to pay for the class, but you don't have to come back.
Nice.
You got an A, you're done. I was like, all right, cool.
You figured that out yourself?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Can I just interject real quick? So Derek Sivers, who founded CD Baby, went to Berklee School of Music, and he met this guy, Chemo, I'm trying to remember his last name, who he was answering an ad in like Craigslist or Yellow Pages or something. And he met this guy, and he's like, you know what? He told him the standard path is for chumps. He's like, come to my house on Thursday at 9 o'clock in the morning, and he's like, I'll tell you how to start at Berklee without taking the first 2 years of classes.
Nice.
And so he went to his house and showed up on time, and he just drilled him on all this theory stuff and showed him all this stuff on the piano. Right. And anyways, taught him in like 4 lessons what he needed to know to get through 2 years of school.
Berklee. Yeah. No, it was really cool, and that's the thing that I think is sad, because those programs are going away.
Yeah.
And so in high school I managed to do all these things, and and there's one of the things. So this is an aside, but in the mechanical engineering that I was studying, we got to the end where we got to do a project, which was to build an actual air car. So we had to design it, blueprint it, get it approved, and then build it. And the instructor, he did model airplanes and stuff. So he gave us a little gas engine, some wheels and stuff, and balsa wood.
So an air car?
Yeah.
Wow.
So he gave us the parameters for the car. We had to, build it to match the parameters. And so like I said, design it, blueprint it, the whole thing, and then build it. And he had a track in the class. Had bank corners and walls on it and stuff. And so we had to build the car so that it would stay on the track. And then he would give us a little engine. We'd put it on there. And he'd start that thing up, and he'd run 3 laps, and he'd time it, see how fast it went, right? So he had this awesome leaderboard. Yeah, it was super cool. Wow. This is high school too, right? So he had this leaderboard up. He'd been doing it for, I think, 10 or 12 years by the time I got there. And I got 3rd place on that board. And I went back for my 10-year reunion, and I saw that class, and it was still there.
Wow.
I was like, hell yeah, I did it, and I still have that car too. I mean, I gave him back the wheels and the engine and stuff like that, but I actually still have that physical car.
That's cool.
But yeah, it's stuff like that. It's going away. It's super bummer.
Yeah, it is.
My wife's a teacher, and she's the same thing. They're teaching more to the standards than they are to the kids, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah. Well, I think everything is changing so fast. People have to learn how to adapt. I think adaptation is really sort of the new normal. It's like anything that today, a year, 6 months, 2 years down the road, is going to be somewhat irrelevant.
Yeah.
And, and a lot of people are going to find themselves out of jobs, I feel like, because a lot of us are being made redundant by technology, by automation of things and all that kind of stuff.
I know that's one of the things that I sort of struggle with. Because like I said, my day job is enabling that stuff. Right?
It's enabling that
So,
stuff, but people are making art with that stuff too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
There's,
So it is.
And that's the thing is like my camera and the computer that I use to edit it. All the
Exactly.
things that I use, I need these
Yes.
things, right? So it's
Yeah.
this thing. On the other hand, self-driving cars is really where it came down to it for me. The self-parking and all that kind of stuff. I like driving. I like cars. That's
Right.
a thing for me, right? And I think about that kind of stuff. I'm like, I get it. My job makes it so that these things can happen, but they kind of freak me out.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I'm not going to stop doing this. Yeah.
Yeah, quantum computers and all that kind
yeah.
of stuff, and AI is like, I mean, those are we're there. It's happening, but
Yeah.
we don't know
Yeah.
to what extent over the next few years it's gonna.
Trying to understand qubits and how they work and all the other stuff.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So, can you tell us about your current projects and where you'd like to focus your energy in the future, in creative endeavors, photography, music, art?
Yeah. So, like I said, I'm in two bands. Bad Ellie is an original pop punk. Love it. And, I mean, it's fun. It's happy. It's so much fun.
What is your schedule like with Bad Ellie? Like as far as rehearsals, songwriting, recording, gigs?
Yeah. So we, at this point, we're getting together and rehearsing every couple of weeks. There's some scheduling. It's difficult because we're all in multiple bands
Right.
and trying to juggle a jillion things. And so we get together every couple of weeks. And Ted's our primary song idea man. He comes in. He's like, I got this idea for a song. I was like, all right, cool. So we'll get together. He'll play the idea, and then we'll put our parts into it and build it. And it's such a fun process to be part of.
Yeah.
And I find for me sometimes it's an in the moment thing.
Yeah.
And he'll play it and I'll hear something, and then Keith will play something. I'm like, oh yeah, that's kind of cool. And I find as the bass player, that's one of the things that I've had to learn, because as a guitar player, I followed the beat, but not necessarily the drums.
Okay.
And that's something that I had to learn. It's like you said, following the kick and the snare and trying to figure out where not to step and who not to step on and
Right.
that kind of stuff, figuring out where the space is. There's times where I'm not great at it, and there's times where I think I do a pretty good job, you know. But that was one of the things I had to learn. But that creative process, it's neat. So it's like Ted will start playing, and I'll play something that sort of matches up with what he's doing. Then Keith will come up with some cool beat, and I'm like, ooh, that's neat. Try to figure out how to balance in between these two, where I'm driving with Ted and like accenting with Keith, and try to do that. And then Michael, our other guitar player, he'll come in, and he plays some ambiance kind of stuff, and trying to figure out who's going to do solos and when they're going to do it and all that. It's a neat process. I really enjoy it.
Do you guys write at every rehearsal, or that's just
not always.
Occasionally?
Ted's got a million ideas, so there's always something. If we want, there's always something new,
Okay.
But a lot of times it's like we'll come up with something, and then we try to get it recorded on a little Zoom recorder or something like that, so we can remember the idea. We don't always record. So some of the rehearsals are, hey, remember we did that thing last time, or let's try to go over that, and then we trying to remember what we did or coming up with something new.
Sure.
That kind of thing. So we do that. We have been in the studio a few times. We're trying to put together some stuff, and we did a few songs, and two of them are actually out on SoundCloud.
SoundCloud?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the website is badellyband.com
Okay.
or .rocks.
All right, I'll put that in the show notes. Is it .com or .rocks?
Both.
Or both.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and that'll lead. There's a couple of songs that are there, and we've been working. It's hard because the guy that we're working with now is actually on tour.
Oh, okay.
And so trying to find a
what
time.
What studio are you recording at?
It's with Rob Diker.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
He's awesome.
So he was out with Dan Reed.
Yeah.
And
He's a great guitar player, great engineer.
yeah.
My friend Stuart, I'm going to interview on Wednesday. He did his albums with Rob as well. And Rob played guitar with his live band at the Aladdin.
Yeah, cool.
And also he's in the documentary that he just won in 2017, he won in Milan, Italy, like best short documentary in an international film festival for that.
Nice.
Yeah, because
Cool.
he like decided to make an album
Mm-hmm.
and do this thing when he was 60. And so Rob was like his
The guy.
guitar player and
Nice.
co-wrote a lot of the stuff and
Yeah.
everything too. So
Yeah, it's actually been, so this is, again, it's new experiences for me, all these things, right? It's like, here I am in my mid 40s going, I can do this, and because we did some pre-demo stuff with a friend of ours. We used that, and then we went to, so that was Joe Spencer. We did some pre-demo stuff just to get all of our ideas down, and it's in a good format.
Mm-hmm.
And then we went over to Kevin Hahn at Opal.
right.
Those are the two that are online right now. And so we got those done with him, and they were great. And so, we're like, heck yeah, let's share these things. We'll get something out there.
Definitely.
And then we decided to go with Rob and see, just to, compare back and forth. And then, so we can record with Rob and then master with Kevin or whatever, whatever ends up happening. But yeah, it's just, time.
I guess Kevin's got another, like a second
Yeah,
studio
he just started
now,
up
too.
a new thing too. Yeah, it was pretty cool. So yeah, so that's with Bad Ellie, and then Breaking the Chains is the Dokken tribute that I'm in, and we try to rehearse once a week.
Okay.
Timing and all that kind of
Right.
stuff. But we have a set schedule once a week that we rehearse with.
And then do you do like, how many Dokken songs do you guys play together?
We have, I want to say 15 or 16 songs.
That's
a whole
pretty
bunch of
good.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah, a whole bunch of them.
Yeah.
We're if we play everything that we've got about, I think we got a 90-minute show that we can pull off.
That's awesome. Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
I saw Dokken once.
Really?
At the Monsters of Rock tour in
Oh God, I wanted to go to that so bad.
89,
Yeah, I wanted to go to that. I never did get to go to it. Oh,
At the time, it was called Rich Stadium, where I saw it, where the Buffalo Bills played.
Oh yeah.
It was like 80,000 person stadium,
Gee.
and
God, that would be so cool.
yeah, that was a good show, man.
Yeah. And see, one of the things, like Metallica was one of my very favorite bands
Right.
ever, and that was early on when they were.
It was
like,
early, yeah.
I would have.
They were not very well known at the time.
Right. Well, and that's the thing is like Metallica and Van Halen. Like, oh my God, Van Halen is the reason I
Best
play
of both
guitar,
worlds.
right?
All right.
Yeah, exactly. It's like Panama. Oh yeah, that's the reason I wanted to pick that thing up in the first place, right?
Yeah,
So,
you and the
Everyone
rest of
else?
us in that
That's
decade, there were like
But, yeah.
Axl Rose talked about when he picked Slash to play with Guns N' Roses
Yeah.
because he was like the only person who auditioned that didn't sound like Eddie Van.
Yeah, exactly. See, and Slash is like my other favorite.
Right.
Love,
he's so great.
Love, and well, of course, Izzy too. Like
Yeah.
the songwriting and everything. It's like, man, that was just. But
That was a great band.
Oh,
Like,
yeah, hell yeah.
So good.
yeah,
Yeah.
But yeah, with Breaking the Chains, we're putting together. So at this point, we've got 75 to 90 minutes that we can pull off. That was a fun one because when I joined, I wasn't really. I didn't listen to a lot of Dokken. If it was on the radio, so when I grew up, we didn't have a lot of money, so I didn't have any tapes and CDs and stuff like that. I'm the oldest, so I didn't have an older brother to, show me all these things, and so I didn't really have that kind of foundational thing. So, and Dokken was one of those bands that was there, and once I went back to when the guys asked me to join the band, I went back and I listened. I'm like, oh crap, they have a ton of cool songs. I remember these ones, right? But it wasn't there for me, right?
Sure.
And so when I joined the band, joined as the bass player, and it wasn't until after I joined that I realized what I was doing. I was like, oh my God, this guy plays like, wow, look at all this stuff. This is hard stuff. This is not just some dude playing the root note. He's playing. This is good. So it's a cool challenge to try and figure these things out. The other challenge is because it's Dokken, there's not a lot written about it. Right.
True.
So I can't find a lot of. It's not like Van Halen where 7,000 people have intricately documented everything you ever played. Where you can go look it all up.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of. This goes back to my organ. There's a lot of ear that I sit there with headphones on and I'm just holding in my ear, trying to figure out what he's playing. And I don't play nearly the way that he does, but I think I pick out enough of the important bits and enough of the details that it's passable. And nobody's ever said, well, that's not how he plays it. You know what I mean? And so it's been a lot of fun. But then I realized after I started getting into that, so I start learning all the songs and stuff like that. And then the guys are like, oh yeah, and by the way, that really high harmony part, yeah, that's you too. I'm like, oh man, I have to do what? So, you know, this is like, it's a whole nother thing. I had never considered myself a singer, ever, right? I never even considered, I could sing, I would sing to myself,
sure.
But I didn't know how to sing, right? So as a, you know, in terms of actually being a singer, I was a terrible singer, you know, and to try and hit those notes, no way, I couldn't do it. And so I started taking lessons, and that's another debut that I haven't. I mean, I do backups and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And since the beginning of when I joined the backups, I've gotten much better at it.
Yeah.
Right. Because I realized that I had to, like in Dream Warriors, super high backups.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm like, man, I don't think I can hit that note. You know, but then I started taking lessons, and because it was another thing. Just like when I started playing the bass, or when I started the camera, or when I started anything, it was like, okay, there's some technical information that I don't have right now. Mm-hmm. And how to sing, there's a lot of technical details there.
There's a lot that goes into that, yeah.
Yeah, and so that's a brand new thing. I've been taking lessons since October, so
okay.
It's really new for me.
Who's your teacher for that?
Eugene Lewis.
Okay.
He's super good.
Yeah.
Super good.
Excellent.
He's sort of he's like that guy that's really good that nobody really knows about. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean.
But people know about him. He's really good. He's a really nice guy. I like him a lot. Yeah, just in that short amount of time, the confidence that I have and the ability that, you know, to hit those notes and be okay with it and learn how to actually sing. I've got just years and years worth of still learning, and there's no way you know, there's so much to understand, but just in the short amount of time, that I've been working on it, to be able to actually hit those notes, to sing the 3-part In My Dreams harmony and stuff like that, that's hard.
Yeah.
And, you know, when the guys in the band told me that I was the guy that was singing that high stuff, and I started listening to it, I'm like, holy crap. Like, man, you know, so we try to be as true to albums as we can, because in my head, for a tribute band to be successful, what people remember is the album, right? They see the show, they remember the album. So what we have to do is try to play the album and show the show, right? So we can't, you know, so while we have the live stuff as a reference, because there's a lot of parts that we have to try and figure out, you know, there's a lot of overdubs and all that stuff. So we try to figure out what we leave in and what we leave out. And so we use the live shows as reference and stuff like that. But we try to sing it like the album. We try to play it like the album.
How is George Lynch in your group?
He is fantastic.
Awesome.
No joke. He is spot on. So good.
Because that's not easy stuff to play. I've only known one person out of the thousands of guitar players that I've met that was pretty good at the George Lynch stuff.
Yeah, no, he is so good. I mean, it's just like we listen to it and it's like, you know, he's like, well, I hit a wrong note. Like, are you kidding? No, you didn't. That was fantastic, you know. And our singer is on too.
Nice.
So
Dokken,
we got, I think we have a pretty good group going together. You know,
that's awesome. Do you guys have a website? Are you just kind of getting going? Or
we have a Facebook page. We don't have the website up yet,
right.
But it's Breaking the Chains Tribute.
Okay, great. I will put a link to that in the show notes as well, so people can check it out. Joining that was another one of those, yeah, sure, why not? Right. You know, it's like, oh my God, what did I get myself into? What do I have to do? You know, well, there's a lot that goes into a tribute band thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's sort of taking on the mannerisms and the character of a real person that
you're acting and playing at the same time, right? So it's a full-on performance.
Yeah.
And that was the last thing that I had to figure out. Well, I have to wear the wig,
right?
You know, I have no hair, so you know that's kind of important. So I have the wig, but I also, you know, watching some of that live stuff, I realized that I'm the guy that runs like crazy all over the place.
Oh, wow.
I'm everywhere, right? It's like George stands sort of over in his area. Sometimes he walks over here or something, but he's kind of over there, right? And Don's just sort of, he walks back and forth and stuff like that.
Okay.
And Jeff is just like crazy man all over the place, you know. And then of course, you know, Mick, the drummer, he's back there. He's wild too, but he's wild in his spot,
right?
You know. So I had to learn how to play and run and play and
that's
do all that stuff.
That's a good step to being able to play in like a Chili Peppers tribute band if you do bass
right?
or that.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, I don't know about the sock though. I don't think I'm going to do that.
No, that's okay. You can maybe do this stuffed animal pants.
Yeah, right.
Have you seen that? That's,
Yep.
All right. So back to photography real quick. So what can help a photograph tell a story? How do you capture that in a photograph if you can?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
So I use rule of thirds because that tends to get your eye to wander through the photo. But there still has to be something else dynamic. You have to have.
What's the circle called?
It's
I don't remember the name for that.
It's on the same lines of rule of thirds. It's the Fibonacci sequence.
Okay.
Is essentially what that. It's sort of the snail shell looking thing, but it's called the Fibonacci. So if you were to map it out, I don't remember what the formula is for it. It's a crazy formula.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things, it's like this naturally recurring thing that just happens all the time. And that's a super good way to try and arrange a photograph. If you have control of what's going on, that is a really good way to do it. I've tried it a couple of times. I don't necessarily see in that format.
Right.
So when I'm looking at it, that's rule of thirds really is just, it's sort of a meat and potatoes. It's easy for my brain to think that way, and it's easy for me to lay it out and just sort of visualize it without having to think about it, and that's the practice thing again, right? It's like playing your guitar and not looking at your fingers while you're playing it, right? Figuring out how to, look up at the ceiling while you're practicing and make sure you still hit the right notes. So seeing in a rule of thirds was sort of like that first step when I was learning composition and trying to figure out how composition worked. That was the easiest way for me to wrap my head around it.
Okay.
Right. So I used that one, but that spiral is a really good way. And that's one of those things, going back to college when I was in marketing, that was one of the things that we had talked about, is when a person looks at an ad, what you want them to do is there's a starting point. You want them to sort of spiral through the photo to see all the pieces so that they collect all the information in the manner that you wanted them to, in the order that you wanted it to, right? So it's really well thought out. So like next time you're looking at an ad, just try to, like, when you first look at it, try to remember how you went through it, right? Don't force your way through it, but just try to keep track of how you went through it. And then you'll start seeing how things get laid out, and the information is placed in a specific, and it's the same, and it's based off of that same idea. So trying to see in that format it's a skill. It takes a lot of practice and a lot of preparation. If you're doing a controlled photo, in order to do that, you really have to know exactly what you're going for. Mm-hmm. I tend to be more on a candid side of things, which is why the rule of thirds works really well for me. I don't, I'm not doing ad layouts and things like that. And so
there's only so many things in life, in the real world, we have control of.
Right.
There's a lot of unforeseen events happening.
Yeah.
A bird flies in your.
Yeah. Well, and especially with my chosen, concert photography.
Yeah.
I always tell people to ask about it. It's like, okay, well, the easiest way that I can explain concert photography is shooting sports in the dark with a strobe light. It really is. I mean, because there's activity all over the place. There's crazy lights going on and off, and you just don't know.
Right.
Right. And so you just have to get comfortable enough with those settings on the camera. You have to find the ones that work for you. Mm-hmm. And once you have those, you have to get them ingrained. And so, like I said, back to rule of thirds. That one's just in my brain. That's how my brain sees this stuff. And then all the controls on the camera, my thumb and my fingers know where to go, and they know what settings. And so I don't have to stop and think about that stuff anymore. Same with playing guitar. I don't have to stop and think about the pattern anymore. I just play it because I know where the things are, and it's like, okay, well, I need to play an E. Great. It's practice getting to the place where those things are comfortable and you don't have to stop and think about them, and then that's when composition comes in, right? So when the technical side of things is not at the forefront, you can concentrate on the other aspects.
Okay.
And so it's like I was saying, I remember specifically when I started learning how to not look at my hand while I was playing. What I would do is I would sit here and I would play, and I would literally just stare at the ceiling. And I did that on purpose. I'm looking at the ceiling and I'm listening to what I'm playing. And if I'm off a little bit, I try to figure out where I'm off, slide forward, slide back, and just get comfortable with that. So I no longer have to think about that kind of thing. Right. I mean, obviously we all have to stop and look at our hand every once in a while. But the less I can do that, the better off I am. The same with the camera. The less I have to actually think about the actual function of the camera, the easier it is to get what I'm going for. So it's just practice. Figuring out how composition is a super hard thing to do, and trying to figure out how to make it a dynamic composition, that's tough. One of the things that still escapes me is landscape. I get the idea, I get the theory behind it, but to try and make that the one that looks like the one in the magazine, I can't do it. I don't see landscape that way. Once in a while, so I guess it's kind of the same thing with everything that you're, in terms of photography. What I've found is that I keep trying, and it's like, so landscape, you got to tell a story. So just like a book, you need a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? So you want to do the same thing with landscape. You need a foreground, midground, and a background. Otherwise, you're going to have a picture, not a dynamic photo, right? And that's the piece. The foreground piece is the piece that's hardest for me in landscape photography. There are times where there's a foreground that just presents itself,
right?
And you're like, all right, cool. That this is a cool wispy grass thing, and then I got some neat things behind it. And so in that sense, there's things that present themselves, but not always. Like you're standing someplace and you're looking, you're like, wow, this is super pretty. But then you start thinking about how to compose that. It's like, oh man, I don't know how to really get a good shot out of that.
Right.
What you want to do is you want to have something, again, that's going to lead you through the photo, right? So the foreground, midground, background, the idea is you see the foreground, and then you start looking around at the things that are next to it. Then you see the mid and you see the back, and then you're checking. You move back and forth in that photo. And what you don't want, there's some composition rules,
right?
But like anything, once you understand what you're doing, then you can do it on purpose if you want to. But
like leading lines and different things.
Leading lines and what you don't want to do is you don't want to have a leading line out your photo. Right, so you want the line to lead you into the photo and then leave you there, right? So you have these lines that lead to something cool at the end of it, right? And then you start looking at that thing, and then you keep going back and forth, right? And you don't. The idea is to lead you into the photo and then have you looking around, right? So if you lead to the edge of the photo, then people just turn their head and stop looking at it, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. And so, but that's why I say, once you understand it, if you do that on purpose, if that's what you're going for, done. And, of course you do that, right? So that's the seeing compositionally is just, it's practice like anything else. Once you understand something about it, like read a book and, get a concept, get an idea, get the leading lines idea, right? Or if you're doing portraits, you don't want to cut people off at their hands or their fingertips. You don't want to cut them off.
Their head usually.
Right. You kind of want to keep the top of heads in. Not always. Sometimes it's cool.
Right.
And that's one of those decision-making things, right? It's like when you decide to do that, do it.
Right.
Don't half-ass it. Okay. That's what I'm doing, so that's how I'm going to do it. One of my very favorite portraits that I've done is actually of a friend of mine, Justine, where I got really close, and it's a frame of her face, but not all of her face.
Oh, wow.
I actually cut it off so that only half of one of the eyes is there, right? So her nose is there, and it goes into shadow on that side that I chopped off, and there's light on the other side, so I've got this really cool picture of her eyes and her makeup and everything, and it cuts off right after that other side of it. So the whole side of her face isn't there, but it's such a cool photo.
Nice.
And then I've got another one actually of her where it's just one eye, and no, I take that back. It's her eyes. You can't see the rest of her face. There's one eye in shadow and one eye prominent, and but it's one of those things. It's like I'm purposely doing
Right.
this. I didn't accidentally do this.
Right.
You know, and like if you're doing a portrait, you don't want to cut somebody off at a joint.
Okay.
It looks weird.
Okay.
Right. So like if you're doing an upper body photo, you don't want to end the bottom of the photo. You don't want to end it at their knees. It looks weird.
Yeah.
It feels wrong.
Sure.
But if you end it in their mid thigh, it's done on purpose and it doesn't feel wrong.
Okay.
Right. So when you look at that photo, it doesn't feel like you chopped something off. It feels like you did it. Right. Like you chose.
How would you describe those more artistic, like crop choices and shadow choices? Dramatic, or would they be? I mean, I'm sure it varies, but
it's a choice.
Right.
I mean, that's really what it comes down to. So if it's an accident, it feels like an accident.
Yeah.
Right. If it's an on purpose, then it becomes dynamic.
So the intention behind it
Yeah.
leads to that.
Right.
It's like a author that writes a story and knows the backstory of the
Yeah.
family that isn't in the book
Right.
already. So
Right.
even though it's not there, it's
It's implied or it's felt or
greater
whatever it is.
understanding.
There's something there. Yeah.
yeah, that's cool.
But yeah, that's the thing. And I mean, it's like recycling somebody else's sayings, but once you know the rules, then you know what you're doing when you're breaking the rules.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And that's really what comes down to. Same thing with music. Note choice is important, and if you just because there's an actual scale or something like, doesn't mean you have to stick in that scale. You can play any note you want.
Yeah.
You might end up with some weird ass 12-tone music, but I never could understand that.
Yeah,
It was so
sorry.
crazy time.
Yeah.
But when you do it on purpose and you know which rule you're breaking, you know, like if you just hit that note that's half step outside that scale and then slide it into the scale, that's cool.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Versus playing that note and going, oh shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Well, I have seen some people play the wrong note and then they just hold it over the different chord changes and suddenly
Right.
it sounds in tune.
Right.
And you're like, actually, that was kind of cool.
yeah, and that goes back to that. It's how you recover the mistake.
Yeah.
Or if in that case was a mistake or a choice, whatever it was.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, if it started as a mistake, it became a choice, and then it became part of the thing. Right. Same thing with photography. You know, it's about recovering it. So if you make a mistake, you try again, or you take that mistake a little bit further and go, now it's a choice. I've recropped this, or I've reconfigured this thing so that now it's doing what I want it to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just knowing the rule, but you don't have to stick to the rule. That's what creativity is.
Right.
So, yeah.
So with photography, how can photography help with musicians and bands, with businesses, with anybody who's trying to start anything?
Yeah.
And also, how does marketing tie into all of that? And where do you see that going over the next, say, 2-3 years? One more thing about that, sorry, real quick.
Yeah.
I read a quote, and I don't know if there's any kind of reason to expect it to be true or not, but 85% of the content that people will be consuming in the next 2 years will be on YouTube or some platform like that.
Man, I better get on there. I have a YouTube channel and
Yeah.
it has nothing useful on it. As much as I hate to say it, video is definitely taking over. As a still photographer and a person who knows that he's not great at video, that's a hard thing for me. And trying to keep what I'm doing relevant is tough.
Is there a way that you can do your photography in a video form? You know, put it into, let's say, you know, because if you're trying to do like a show, you know, you can do a show, a virtual show,
Right.
with music, with your, you know.
Yeah, there's definitely ways to do it, and still be on the photographic side versus the video side of things. It's a new skill. And it's just I haven't picked it up yet. But that's why I say, as a person I love still photography, and that's hard to see. I mean, it's not hard to see that everything's going to video because photos are still important, right?
They always will be, I think.
You know, as you're scrolling through on Facebook or Instagram or stuff like that, it's a mix, mostly of photos still and some video. And of course, the video is going to, like you said, it's going to go to YouTube. And one of the things that drives me most crazy is when I go to something on YouTube, if I go to something that's just a bunch of still photos over and over again, it's like, come on, this is not video, right? This is not the right format for this. I get it. It's a way to get it out there.
Right.
And it's a way to put it on that particular platform because it's video based, right? So that makes sense. But yeah, it's interesting for me trying to figure out how to keep the photos relevant. But on the other hand, in terms of marketing and stuff like that, what band do you know of that doesn't have photos out there? What band do you know of that doesn't need a photo for their album cover or for their release music, whatever it is they're doing for the cover page on their Facebook, or and so for that band, like a starting out band or a giant band, either way, photos are relevant. They're necessary in order to continue that thing going. It's marketing. And so, for any band, you need a portrait. You want to have good dynamic photos of live. And one of the things that I feel like, if you have good live photography, even though it's a still photo, if it's done well, then you still get movement.
Yeah.
It's not a video, but you still feel that energy coming through, right? And that's a big thing.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of what I try to focus on, is if I can figure out how to make that energy still be happening, right? I want it to look like, oh man, this was cool. Everybody's having a great time, super energetic and that kind of thing. So that's what that's my goal, is to try and find those shots. And that way I can still be a still photographer, and it's still in there, still necessary, relevant, that kind of thing. And so for a band that not have that kind of stuff, it's hard to book outside of your comfort zone.
Right.
Because anybody who doesn't know you as a person has no reference point, right? So photos are the gateway in. Photo and video are the way in, and you got to have audio. So if you don't have any of those things, if you have one of those things or kind of a little bit of those things, it's still difficult, right?
Yeah.
You need like a package. And so I think in that case, the electronic press kit is the big deal. Photos have to be part of that, right? If it's all video and audio, that's cool. You get the show and stuff like that, but you don't leave anything for the venue to promote with. They promote with that photo, right? I think the show poster is still a big piece, right? Even though the poster is electronic and it's, maybe it's on Facebook as an event or something, it's still the show poster,
Yeah.
And I mean, there's that was my very first show poster. It's Ants in the Kitchen at the Crystal Ballroom.
Nice.
And that was just, well, again, as a still photographer, that's the kind of thing I like. I want to look at that kind of stuff over and over again.
Oh, that's a ton. I mean, there's a ton of character movement. You can almost hear the music coming out of it,
Right.
So that's great.
Yeah, and that's I think where in terms of marketing and things like that goes. I think that's where, for a band, that's the kind of thing. You want an energetic live performance. You want both video and stills, because they get shared differently. And then of course you need some audio to go along with it. And so, and then like in terms of presence online and things like that, those kinds of things are used to build your website. Yeah. Even if your website is 90% video, you can still have that background photo that the video is on and that kind of stuff. So, I think it's still there. Trying to stay relevant, trying to market it it's a challenge, and you always have to learn those new things, So, I can't be, for me personally, like I would love to take black and white photos all the time, but not everybody wants that,
Right.
So it's a thing you have to learn how to process. You have to learn how to edit the black and white. You have to learn how to edit the color, because they're very different edit styles.
Yeah.
You have to, there's the, I'm trying to remember the word for it. I've tried to do it a couple of times. It's like an animated still. It's pretty cool.
A GIF or something, or not?
It's
quite.
not quite a GIF, but it's like a GIF.
Okay.
It's where you take a still photo and you animate one piece of it.
Oh, okay.
And just like, for instance, like a river or something going through, right? So you have the landscape on the sides of the river is all still photo, and then you have the river sort of flowing down through the middle of the thing.
Okay.
So it's a video of still, so like
interesting.
Moving. I can't remember the name of it. It's actually a thing, but it's like a GIF. But yeah, you do it with the still photo. So that's it's another one of those things. You have to have the right subject to do it and try to do it. I did one recently of a drummer. I only had 3 shots, so it's kind of choppy, and I turned it into a GIF. But basically, I took one shot of the whole kit, and then he was doing different things in each of the. So I animated him.
Oh,
so
cool.
within the kit, I animated him. And so, yeah, he's drumming back and forth, going across the cymbals.
Nice.
And yeah, I mean, it turned out really neat. I liked it a lot.
Yeah.
Had I taken more photos, I could have made it smoother transition.
Okay.
But you can do the same thing if you do it with a video. You can take a still out of the video and do the same thing. The difference being that the video resolution is, for my camera, the video resolution is not as great as the full resolution of my sensor.
Sure.
So still picture is a higher resolution.
So any marketing tips for anybody who is a musician or an artist or a business that is trying to kind of get their brand out there, their name known, their audience built up,
right?
All of that good stuff.
Hire me, I'll do photos.
There you go. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, from my opinion, you got to have photo, video, and audio. If you're a band, I mean, that's what you do.
Yeah.
So if you don't have those things, then it's more difficult.
Yeah.
Like I said, once you get outside of your group or your community, where people don't know who you are.
Right. Yeah. Not just your mom going to your show, but maybe some other people too.
Yeah, maybe some people you don't know.
Yeah.
So bringing all your friends to all your shows every time, after a while, your friends are going to stop coming to all your shows.
Exactly. Yes.
So trying to do that, you need to have all those pieces in place. And so, yeah, I think, I love doing band photos. I really do. I have a good time doing it. And the thing, it's just, my approach to a photo shoot is fun. Like, if it's not fun, I don't want to do it. There's nothing, it shouldn't be serious. We should screw around and have a good time. Let's do it.
Yeah.
And so it should be easy. It should be comfortable. It should be, something that we can do. So yeah, in terms of doing that, I think that kind of thing also, it translates into the photo. And it adds that energy that we're looking for, right? So even if it's just a band photo, everybody's posed, if we're having a good time, people's faces are lighter,
yes,
and it's more approachable, that kind of thing. So yeah,
I like that.
Yeah.
That's good. So everybody, if you're in a band, Paul Brown's your guy.
Yes.
Photography. So what are one or two memorable stories from your career so far in photography, music, whichever you want to choose? Or
I've had a really good time doing this stuff.
Yeah.
Right. The photography, I love just being at the show. I really do. I've managed to shoot a lot of really cool things. Years ago, I was helped to go on tour, like a mini tour with Delana and a bunch of the local guys, Brandon and Kevin Hahn and Jeff Buhner and Kevin Rankin, and I got to go to Minnesota and Wisconsin with them and do a couple of shows, and I went up to Seattle with them. But the show that we did in Wisconsin, they were opening, it was a festival, it was like 25,000 people. And here I am with my camera and a backstage pass, and I'm like, holy shit, this is super cool.
Yeah.
And, tons of cool stuff. Shinedown playing that night, and Buck Cherry, and Blackstone Cherry. I love these guys. These are all, this is really cool, right? And of course, Delana opens the show, and so, here I am. I'm like, this is awesome. But one of the things that I remember the most was it was really neat. We were backstage just hanging out by the tour buses. And, we were talking. It was a small group of people. And I didn't really know the guys. I was just there. We were hanging out and talking. I didn't know who they were. And the guy, he's talking. He's got a southern accent. And he's talking. And he's like, yeah, when we get done with tour, I told my buddy I'd come over and help him mow his lawn. He's got a couple of acres, we'll ride a lawnmower, blah, blah, blah. And he's telling this story, And I looked down and he's got tattoos all over his arms, so I'm checking out his tattoos because they're pretty cool. And one of them is this like train going right across his forearm. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, whatever, So we get done, we break off and all that. And later on, Blackstone Cherry was playing. It was the lead singer. He said he's just like totally normal, cool guy. He's like, yeah, my buddy's having some hard times, so I told him I'd help him mow his lawn. I'm like, really? This is cool,
right?
So it's that kind of thing. And
seeing the reality of
he's
behind
a person.
The scenes.
He's just chill. Everything's cool,
right.
And there's only been one or two people that I've met that was just like, oh, come on, man, really? A little bit full of yourself, don't care.
Right.
But for the most part, I've met like a whole bunch of just really cool guys, really chill.
Yeah.
I got to do this festival, Guitars Under Stars, the first year that they did that here locally. And they had, Tracy Guns and Rudy Sarzo, Robert Cray, Los Lonely Boys, like Pat Travers, a whole bunch. It was like a 3-day thing. It was a big deal.
Yeah.
And there's a ton of really cool. And I remember, and POD was there. And they were playing the first night. And the guys that put the show together, they wanted to get a photo with them, and so they came. I was in the middle of shooting some other band. At this time I honestly don't remember what band it was. But like, hey, we got a photo op. We need somebody. So they pulled me over there, and I'm like, holy crap, this is POD. This is awesome, And so we're in their RV, and we do a couple of photos, and then just hang out. They were the coolest guys. They're just totally down to earth, chill.
Nice.
And they play their show after their show. We're backstage and we're just talking and hanging out by their bus. And it was really neat. Same thing with like Los Lonely Boys and Tracy Guns and Rudy Sarzo. They're just chill. It was really neat. I actually got a couple of my really favorite photos. There's a few of Tracy and a few of Rudy. And, these are guys just like, I've been following you guys for so long.
Right. Didn't Rudy play with like Ozzy and with Whitesnake too back in the day?
Quiet Riot.
Yeah.
All kinds, And
wow.
I can't remember who he's playing with a bunch of stuff now too. And, Tracy Guns is like originating of LA Guns and Guns N' Roses.
Oh my God.
Yeah. That's where Guns came from.
Yeah,
so, I'm like, this is super cool. And so some of my favorite photos, and I've actually shared them online and had like mini conversations with them. I'm like, holy shit, that's so cool. So just the amount of opportunities that I've had, it's so cool. And it's because because of friends.
Yes.
It really comes down to the people that I've made friends with and everybody, like I said, in the community, we're all just sort of supporting each other and doing, it's like you hear somebody needs help with this or that. And it's like, well, I know this guy, he does that, I've got a friend who does this. And, or if somebody asks me about video, I'm like, well, in my head, I'm like, I know who the video guys are. It's like, I'm not going to take the job and go, I can do it, sure, whatever. And then, it's like, no, and you want a good videographer, go talk to Bobby. Bobby's kick ass.
Yeah.
Whatever it happens to be. And it's that same kind of thing. The opportunities that I've been afforded is just put in some practice, and I got some cool shots and I've managed to build up sort of this presence, I guess. I don't know. It's sort of hard to still see me in this kind of way,
Well, it's the Paul Brown photography brand of concert photography.
It is, and it's such a weird thing to me because it's just me taking photos, But
it is, but it's you with a lot of time and experience taking photos that other people can't achieve because they haven't put in those hours. The practice and things, but that's the thing. That's these opportunities that I've had is like, man, that is so cool. I can't believe I got to do that.
was like, this is neat. I got to shoot LA Guns when they got together, when it was the actual original band, when they first got back a few years back. I actually got to go shoot the show. I'm like, this is cool, And it's those kinds of things, and it's just building those relationships so that when that kind of opportunity comes past, it's like, I'll pass this on. It's like, I know this guy, and this guy knows me, and and we do that kind of thing. Yeah, it's been really neat.
Excellent.
But yeah, it still trips me out when people come up. I meet them for the first time, and they're like, "Oh, hey, what's your name?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm Paul." Like, "Well, what's your last name?" "Brown." And then I get this weird look, and that's still the look that just it makes me laugh, and it's weird to me, right? Because they get this look, and they're like, "It's happened a bunch of times." Like, Paul Brown Photography. I'm like, yeah, that's me. They're like, holy shit, I love your stuff. I'm like, oh my God, this is so weird. All right, cool, man. So, I mean, I love it. It's super cool. But that was always one of my things as a photographer. I'm the guy with the camera attached to my face, so nobody really knew what I looked like. And, so it's like I was there. They knew the watermark, and and I've had that happen a bunch of times too. Like, like I've seen your watermark on a bunch of stuff. It's like, oh, cool. You know, and that's why I do it. Because, like I said earlier, once it goes online, you sort of lose control of it. So as it spreads, however it's going to be, hopefully that thing goes along and there's a little bit of recognition that comes back with it that leads to other stuff.
Is photography in any way lucrative for you?
I have managed to pay for my camera bag with it.
Okay.
Not the physical bag, but all of my gear is now self-sustaining.
There you go.
As a career, a profession, a living, no, it's not a living. Yeah. But at the same time, I have a day job.
Right.
And so I haven't decided to make it a living.
Right.
I think if I wanted to, it would be a lot of work, and I think that's why I haven't done it.
Right.
As of yet, because my day job is actually a really good gig.
It takes the fun and the lightness out of it when you make what you love.
Yeah.
Your
definitely.
Soul,
Yeah.
And I don't want to discourage people that's where your heart is, but there's a reality to it.
Yeah. Yeah, there is. When it becomes a business, it's a different entity. As a separate story, I was a collegiate bowler, and the tour, college bowling tour, the whole thing. And I wasn't the best. I was good enough to be pro, but I would have been a low pro, which means that I would have had to struggle. I probably would have made enough to finance my traveling and whatnot and not go underground, but it wouldn't have been comfortable, right? But what happened was I got to that point, and when it was time to decide to go pro or not, I realized I wasn't having fun because it had become a job. Not a job, but it was like so much extra effort went into it, and it stopped being fun. It stopped being what I started doing it for. And while at this stage in my life, I don't think if I was to turn photography into a business, I would have a backup plan already, right? I mean, it's going to be like early retirement. That's when I go and make this a thing, make this an actual living. That'll be my trade regular day job for this regular day job, but with a cushion, because I've had the years of regular day job. But like you said, it's a completely different thing when you turn it into an actual thing where you have to make money, where you have to do enough to make it live. It's a hustle. Yeah. And it's work.
And it takes a lot to be ramen profitable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just to live on top ramen.
Yeah. So yeah, I considered it successful when I was able to upgrade my equipment with money that I had earned.
There you go.
And so that was goal number one, is get to that point where I'm even, where I can get that cool thing that the Sigma lens that I bought, the $1,600 Sigma, I did a wedding. Cool. Just paid for that lens. Done. When I upgraded my camera, I had a good summer. I had like 2 weddings and several other like photo jobs and stuff. I was like, cool, $3,500, camera done, let's do it. Yeah. And so yeah, that was cool.
When you do weddings, do you bring 2 cameras or do you do it with 1 camera?
I have done both.
Okay.
I like having 2 cameras, but I kind of would rather have 2 cameras with an assistant. Or, something like that. Just in that it's for a wedding, same for a concert. I mean, for a concert, I would never go with 2 cameras. It's just too much in the middle of a crowd. That's crazy time. But it's the same idea. Is you need to be mobile and you have to see it and you have to get there. And with 2 cameras and the accompanying equipment and all the stuff that goes along with it, I'm slower.
Sure.
Right, because then you got stuff bouncing around physically,
Right,
and trying to control all this stuff. Right,
it's like you don't want to miss a shot.
So I've done both. I did one wedding where I borrowed, my friend had a 5D Mark IV, the 50 megapixel. That one is kick-ass for portrait. It's so good, but it's not as good in low light. So
Right.
there's a big difference in low light capability, which is why I don't go with that one. But for a wedding that has enough light and all that kind of stuff, those portraits were so good. You know, I mean, that camera is super cool.
Yeah.
I love it. But juggling both of them during that wedding, because I had my bag that had extra lenses on it, because I have more than 2 lenses. So I have my bag, I have 2 cameras hanging off of each shoulder, and then, it's like, oh crap, which one's which? I don't remember, It's tough. So it would be nice to, if I'm doing 2 cameras, I would like to have an actual person to help me control some of the stuff, right?
Yeah.
Keep it straight, and so that I can maintain mobility. I've found my Mark III, it's great.
Yeah.
And it's not that it doesn't get really good portraits and stuff like that. They're just a full-size blown-up shot of my camera. I can make it a poster. I can make it giant, literally. So I had one photo from Hairfest, the tribute festival every summer. Last year, the owner of the Wild Hair, one of the sponsors for Hairfest, she wanted a new photo. She saw one of mine. She asked if she could use it, and we actually blew it up to 6 feet by 6 feet. And so I haven't seen it yet. I talked to her yesterday, literally, about it. She has it. She just needs to hang it. So my camera, I've got enough information on that sensor that I can make a big photo, and it's still going to look really, really good.
Nice.
But that Mark IV, that's just, you're doubling the megapixels, which is like resolution way through the roof. And the cool thing about that is that you can actually be a little bit loose on your crop, which means you still have tons of information. So if you crop in on it, you're not losing, you're still going to get a really big, really nice photo with a lot of resolution. So you can be a little bit looser on your crops and things like that. So there's that added benefit. But like I said, if you have any kind of low light situation, you really need to think about it.
Have you tried the 1DX Canon?
No, I haven't. I thought about it, but in fact, when I was looking at my 5D, I considered that one. It's like $6,000 for that, $6,700 or something like that. I considered it, but I found that it also doesn't have the low light capability that the Mark III does.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So super cool photos and stuff like that. But
I
the Mark
it's
III
meant
was
for like the Olympics, like type of action photography and and video. I know it shoots 120.
Yeah. That thing is great.
Yeah.
But it's just, I did a lot of research because, like I said, I got to the point where I had a really good summer. I'm like, man, I need to upgrade the camera, and I was weighing through a bunch of different options trying to figure out. And when I came right down to it, that the 5D Mark IV hadn't come out yet, so we didn't have, that wasn't an option. So there was the 1D, the Mark III, and then there was a couple other lower end, not lower end, but different, right, within the lineup. And I did tons of reading, tons of research, trying to. This goes down to understanding how the actual camera works, and like I'm looking at the specs and trying to balance out and figure out, because by the time I bought this particular camera, I knew what I wanted. I understood what I could get out of it, and so it was, it was easy to figure out.
Yeah.
I was like, well, I want to do this, and so figuring out what that most important piece for me was. And really what it came down to is I shoot a whole lot of concert stuff. And so because I'm shooting so much concert stuff, I really need that low light capability.
Performance, yeah.
And so the ISO was a big part of my choices.
Makes sense.
And then everything else, it was like, all right, cool, that one.
What photographers and creative people or any other kind of artists would you recommend checking out?
There's always the classics. And for me, I'm a fan of Ansel Adams.
Yeah, I love his stuff.
How could you not? That's just, this goes back to the black and white and all this. I love it. It makes me feel something when I look at that photo. For music, I've been reading like Guitar World and Rolling Stone and those things since I was a teenager, and I love those things. And so like Ross Halfin and Jim Marshall, for rock photographers, those two guys, man, those guys are great. So those are like a couple of my favorite, rock photographers. Yeah, I don't know the automotive photography it's a whole nother skill. There's a guy that I just actually I watched a show first, is where I first found him, but then I looked him up. His name's Pepper Yandel. Oh my God, his car photos are so cool. They are just kick-ass.
What do you think makes a great car photo? Because there's so many factors, right? The glare and the light. I mean, I feel like light is such a big part of that. But
it's a huge part. And the thing with automotive photography is to really do a good job. So I've watched a couple of behind the scenes videos of how he does it. He shoots by himself, but he shoots remote. So he'll set the camera up and he composites everything. And so what he does is he has a remote, and then he has a remote flash, and he carries that flash around, that flash head, and he lights things, and he takes specific photos all the way around, and then composites it back together again.
Wow.
Yeah, so he can shoot on location by himself with a single flash, and he just puts it all back together again.
That's incredible.
Because otherwise, what you end up needing is a really big space.
Yeah.
Because I'm doing more and more flash photography. I shied away from it for a long time because I didn't understand it. And it's just another technical thing you have to learn. And it's a huge amount of trial and error.
And you bounce the flash most of the time, don't you? Or not necessarily?
It depends on the situation.
Okay.
Well, again, it's all about creative control and breaking rules and that kind of thing. So you do what you do to get what your view is. And so I've started getting into flash photography in the last probably 3 or 4 years, and I've gotten a lot better at it. When I started out, I had a couple of speed lights. I didn't really know how to do it. Bouncing the flash it's cool. There's not a lot of error with it, right? You bounce it, it's going to look pretty good. That was learning the difference between the little crappy pop-up flash, which I hate. The 5D doesn't even have one. No flash on that thing, so it's all off. So it's either hot shoe or off camera. So I went from using the little pop-up flash. I read about it. I figured out, okay, well, now I know why I don't like that thing. I understand what's going on. It's a small light source. It's going to look weird, and that kind of thing. The bigger the light source, the softer it's going to be. The smaller the light source, you're going to get a hard light, which is going to give you some sharp shadows and things like that. And it really comes down to creativity at that point. Once you get it, then you know how to manage it, right? And so I shied away from it a long time. And with concerts, I really didn't. I found that I didn't always need it. There's times now where I do actually use a flash while I'm shooting a concert. Generally, it's to combat that red light thing that we were talking about earlier. And with digital, it's just how the sensor actually processes. There's a thing, I think it's called a Bayer array. It's a color grid thing that lays over the sensor and colors the pixels. And it's just how the camera does it. But there's more red than there is of anything else. It's more sensitive to red. So I would use a flash now in order to combat some of that red, because you can't always pull the red out without it looking funky and weird.
So you use a flash in concert photography now?
Sometimes.
Right.
Yeah, I do. For years and years, I didn't. If you use it right, and what I do is I turn that flash down as far as I can go. So I'm using just a tiny bit of flash, just enough to light the subject.
Okay.
And again, it depends on the distance from the subject and stuff like that. And since I try to shoot fairly close most of the time because I like that feel. It works. I can get the flash to throw that far without being weird. But yeah, I'll do that, and then it's learning a new trick, And I graduated from speed lights, so now I have like 4 speed lights with remote triggers. So I went from the little pop up to the hot shoe speed light to now I have remote triggers, where I can trigger, multiple flashes all at the same time off of a remote.
And the remote mounts on
the hot shoe on the camera. Yeah. And so I've got 4 remote triggers, and then each, like the speed lights, can be triggered optically. So I can use the radio remotes to trigger my big studio lights, and then I can trigger one of the speed lights with the radio remote, and then that speed light will act as a master to any other speed lights. So I think I've got 7 different flash heads at this point. So I can light up all kinds of stuff. Yeah. And it's just, like I said, I started figuring out, and each time I would run into a roadblock, I'm like, well, how am I doing this? So in terms of car photography, it's an even bigger light source is what you need. Like I've seen some behind the scenes on like Motor Trend shots and stuff like that, and they have like this huge room that's got this massive seamless So there's no, edges and stuff like that.
Right.
And then they've got this like 10-foot wide light panel up above the car. And, it's like, how am I going to do that in a garage? I can't do that. How do you do that outside? It's not happening. So that's when I found this guy, Pepper Yandel, and I saw how he was doing. It's like, ooh. Suddenly it's attainable.
Yeah.
And obviously he's got tons of skill, and I'm in terms of automotive photography, I'm not, I need to practice. That's I've done it on, I've got a couple of nice cars, decided to treat myself because I'm middle-aged now. And, I've tried it out on a couple of times, and, I've come up with results that I'm happy with. And, it's just practicing. Trying it and trying it and trying it. And like you said, cars are a tough thing because you have all these cool angles, but all these cool angles make weird reflections, and you have to try to figure out where they're at. And
with guitars as well.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The gloss and
just for sure. So there's tons of stuff. There's that in terms of people that I watch. Pepper's the one because I love cars. I mean, I really do. I don't know how many times I've said that, but I do.
Yeah, it's a few, but that's all right. You're getting that point across.
So, so for me, cars and music and photography, they're all equal footing for me. And I would recommend checking him out if you like cars at all.
Nice.
Check his stuff out. It's really cool.
What advice would you give 16-year-old Paul if he would listen?
Listen.
Yeah.
Keep trying. The one thing that I wish is that I would have put myself out there a little bit more, right? I wish I wouldn't have waited until I was in my 40s to join my first band. As much as I enjoyed music and I enjoyed learning and playing, and I do it for me. For me, a bad day is fixed by sitting down with my guitar, right? If I'm having, Cindy will do the same thing, if I'm having a bad day, if I'm just not in a good mood, whatever it is, it's just like, well, why don't you go in the music room for a little bit, just hang out for a while. And it's that thing. It's like you sit down with it and, for 20 minutes or so, you're just struggling. You're not into it. And then something flips and you just let everything else go. It just goes and you just start playing, right? So as much as that's always been there for me. And then, I always sit down, I'll play, and it'll be hours and hours. And I'm like, holy crap, it's dark in here. And, so there's that. So if I could get me as a kid to do something, it would have been, not necessarily join a band, but don't be so afraid. I would always get to a point where I understand a thing and I get how it works and stuff like that, but then I was always afraid to put myself out there and make that mistake, that first mistake. And it was like, oh my God, everybody's watching. Oh, what do I do? I was too afraid of that. So
that's a tough one to learn.
Yeah. If I wasn't super confident in what I was doing, I wasn't going to do it. And music is hard. There's so much stuff and so many different pieces. I read a cool book by I think it was the bass player of the Squeeze. I can't remember the guy's name. It's This Is Your Brain on Music.
Nice. Man,
I love that book. It was such a cool book. He was a bass player. He made it. He went on tour, world tours, and the whole big deal, right? And when the band naturally stopped, he went back to school and got a doctorate in neuroscience with a thesis on music and how it interacts with your brain.
Wow.
And it was super cool because it was at that point that I realized how many different pieces there are that are going on in order to be a musician, right? Mm-hmm. And so the mistakes that I was afraid of making, and I get why I was afraid of making those mistakes. And it's because you're not just sitting there playing a guitar. You're playing a guitar, you're keeping time, there's muscle memory in your fingers, you're listening, you're reading, you're sight reading, whatever it is you're doing. You're doing so much more than just playing a guitar, right? All these little components that go into it. And for me, I was always afraid because I wasn't comfortable enough with any given piece of that to and I was afraid to make the mistake. So if I could tell my younger self, don't be afraid of that mistake, just try it. If it works, cool. If it doesn't, learn something. Do better next time. And I've always been able to try, but not in a public setting.
Okay.
So that was always the hard part for me.
But you figured it out.
Well, yeah.
And you
Middle age.
You got there. That's all right. It's never too late to learn. And I think everybody's learning and growing, and everybody has sort of inner struggles like that, you know. I remember, like, there's a couple of things that I heard. One was at a song camp that I went to in Sisters, Oregon. One of the instructors said, the best thing that somebody ever told me that helped my performances more than anything else and helped me be able to do this better than anything else I heard was, it's none of my business what anybody else thinks of me.
Yeah.
And so if you sort of remove that burden of,
right,
I'm going to make a mistake and they're going to judge me and I'm going to feel bad for it.
Right.
It's very freeing.
Yeah.
Because you're not limited anymore, you know.
Right. Anymore. All you got to do is be happy with what you're doing and enjoy yourself.
And and keep learning and growing from it. But
I
love that. How do photographers, creative people, and artists keep from being obscure or obsolete and just sort of get lost in the noise of the world?
You got to keep learning something new.
Okay.
Yep. Stick with it and keep learning. If you stop learning, if you keep doing the same old thing, well, that's what you're doing. The same old thing, and eventually, people are going to move on. So trying to do something different, and just thinking about that creative side. Just let that creative side drive for a while. Something's going to happen. It'll be,
Use your right brain also.
Exactly.
Yeah. How important do you feel that music and the arts are to society?
Oh, totally important. This goes back to what we were saying earlier. It's like, if we didn't have that, then creativity, music, the arts, that's the creative side, and we need that to survive. So if I didn't have music as an outlet, those bad days wouldn't go away. You know what I mean? It's a bad day where I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to pick up this guitar and I'm just going to, I don't know what's going to come out. And I don't care what's going to come. I'm just going to let it come out, you know? And when it comes out, and then 4 hours later, you're like, holy crap, that was awesome. If that wasn't an outlet, I don't know what I would do. I wouldn't be complete. I wouldn't know. I wouldn't have. When I'm at a show, when I'm at a concert, when I'm doing a portrait set, when I'm shooting a wedding, I can't stop shooting. It's just one of those things that it makes me happy. So I can't imagine not having that kind of a thing. Yeah. It's still out there. I just hope that there's some sort of importance put on it still. Right. I don't want that to go away. The younger generations and stuff like that, I hope that they're still encouraged, that they still have that drive and they still are able to fulfill that drive. And I mean, I don't know what it's going to look like, but it just that creativity needs to be fostered. It has to continue. Yeah. Because otherwise we're just going to be a bunch of boring old robots.
That's true.
Nobody wants that.
No. I think you've answered this, so we can skip it if you want. Should photographers and creative artists just go for it or get a stable job and do their art on the side?
You know what? I was talking with my wife about that earlier, trying to figure out how to answer it. It's, obviously, I have a stable job. I didn't ever really have a plan. I accepted things as they came. Is, I guess, the easiest way for me to consider it. This job that I have, I didn't necessarily seek it out. I wanted a job. At that point in my life, I didn't really have the outlets either. That was at the same time that digital photography was still pretty crappy and I couldn't afford film. And so I really didn't have that. That wasn't a solid piece of me at that point in time when I got this job. And then musically, I had just gotten out of college and I had tried so hard to get that minor. And, it was a minor in jazz, and jazz is not my main drive. I was at U of O, and that's the kind of school it is, so it was a jazz thing. And while I enjoy jazz, I'm just not a jazz player. Right. My actual skills really weren't that good. So at the point in time when I chose the day job route, it sort of that was a natural progression for me at that point in time. There's definitely a part of me that wishes that I would have just thrown it all to the wind and said, I'm joining a band, let's do it. Heck yeah, I still want to do that. So there's definitely that point, but it's hard to say because there's stability versus, and it really comes down to your risk aversion. Where does your risk aversion lie? How much risk are you willing to take on? Because you can get really high with some really big lows.
Right.
Or you can sort of take a safer route where you sort of mute some of those highs and lows, but you're stable. You can make it through, So for me, it was sort of the safer route. Well, not sort of, it's definitely the safer route. I've had a super stable job for 20 years, and it's allowed me to explore the other things that I want to.
And you've kept on with your creative stuff. You haven't.
Yeah.
That was never.
Right. Yeah, I didn't really have to give up any of it. At the same time, like I said, it took the highs and the lows out of that. Right. So there was still, I was able to do it. Maybe I could have, maybe I couldn't have. I don't know. It's looking back, but at the same time, I'm not a person who does a lot of regrets. Yeah. I don't rethink things. I mean, yeah, there's hindsight. I could have changed things, but my personal philosophy or theory is that I have made all of the best decisions I could have at the time with the information I had.
That's great.
Yeah. And that's just how I look at it. It's like, yeah, I made that decision. At that time, that was the best thing I could have done.
Yeah.
Right? Now, sure, I could look back and go, oh, what if I did this?
Yeah.
But, where do I get? All I can do is keep going forward and figure out where I'm going with it. So it's super hard to say, do you go for it or do you go with stability?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's an individual. If we didn't have people that just go for it, then we lose that creative art. We need people that do that.
Yes, we do.
There have to be people that do that. It makes it so that I can do it. Right? Got to have both.
Yeah. Perfect. So, what skills are important for everyone to learn? Like every single person should learn these skills.
Every last person on earth should learn to play an instrument. It doesn't matter how old you are. Try it. Do it. It's super important. This goes back, honestly, it goes back to physiology thing within your brain. It's how your brain works. And that book, This Is Your Brain on Music, anybody should read that. You don't have to be a musician to read that book. It's super interesting. But what it goes into is it's brain development. When we're born, our brain is one big blob. We don't have a left-right side. It's all one thing. Right? The left-right side actually develops. And the thing that happens is you lean one way or another, as that's created, you're losing synapses. You're losing those connections between the left and the right side. The thing that an instrument does is it maintains them. Because you have to be analytical and creative. You have to have motor memory and you have to be able to hear, you have to see, all of these things. You have to do them all at the same time. In time. In order to play an instrument, you have to have muscle memory, motor skills. You have to be able to read whatever kind of music is in front of you. You have to physically be able to play whatever those notes are, and then you have to hear them audibly. Yeah, you have to hear them, and then in a split second, you have to analyze that. You have to figure out if it's the right note, how long you're going to hold it, what you're going to do to fix whatever's going on. You have to be able to, in time, immediately adjust to all of those inputs. And then at the same time, you're also counting, you're keeping track, and if you're playing an instrument, maybe you're singing. Well, that's a whole nother thing you're adding to it, right? There's a lot of different activities going on in your brain. And what's really happening neurologically is that your left and your right brain have to work together. You're keeping those connections. All those connections stay. So the earlier you start learning an instrument, that's why it's so easy for kids to do stuff. You teach a kid how to do something and they pick it up immediately, where if you're 40 trying to learn it, it's going to take you forever. It's because that kid, their brain hasn't separated. They haven't lost those connections. Those connections are still there. They may know how to do stuff, but that's just our encouraging. But with an instrument, play an instrument, because what it's doing is it's forcing your brain to stick together. You're keeping your left and right connected.
Nice.
I had a manager at my day job. She read a study at one point, and it was a study that concluded that musicians make better software programmers because of the way those connections are made, right? So those connections that are maintained in your brain as a musician make it easier for you to approach a problem and have logical and creative connections.
Well, playing music is a lot of problem solving.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's my advice to everybody. And like I said, it doesn't matter how old you are. And there have been studies that show that dementia is less in musicians. True. And Alzheimer's is less in musicians.
Yeah, learning
and that
a
kind
language
of stuff.
or an instrument.
Exactly. Yeah, so that actually helps in later life too, and besides giving you hours and hours of enjoyment,
Right. Well,
so yeah.
another thing to be said for that is if you can play an instrument, you can learn how to play any instrument just about, because
yeah, for sure.
you already know the language. You're just learning new techniques and new,
Right.
muscle
It's new
memory.
muscle. Yeah, that's why there's a cello sitting over here in the corner.
Yeah, I love
Why
it.
not?
I know.
Cindy's learning to play the cello, but it's one of those things like I don't play a cello, I don't play violin, and I've never played anything like that,
Wow.
but I play a guitar and a bass.
Like Jack Black said, though, you turn a cello on its side and cello, it's a bass.
That's right. So yeah, it's just figuring out where those notes are, and once you figure out like you said, it's muscle memory, it's motor skills at that point, and you can already hear the notes. So
what are some social issues that people should care more about?
Plastic in the ocean.
Okay.
That one is the one. Cindy and I are both we're making changes to try and figure that out. There's too much plastic in the ocean. Plastic's not going away, and there's no sense fooling ourselves, but we can be better at it. I think that's the one that we're most. And then music in schools. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Previous question. Play an instrument. That's what you need to do. So music in schools has to stay. I mean, we got to find a way to do it. We can't take all of that stuff out of schools because what is it going to look like without music? That's terrible.
And gonna misquote it, but if you keep taking the arts away, sooner or later people will have nothing to read or write about. Oh, Mr. Holland's Opus maybe, or something like that.
Yeah, that's true for sure. I mean,
a good answer. Plastic in the oceans. So
and
what
music in
do we
schools.
do about that? The plastic in the oceans. How do we help with that?
Are
Are there websites dedicated to that?
I don't know any off the top of my head. I had seen a thing or read a thing about a kid that came up with this floating treatment plant thing where they could sit it out there in that dead spot where I think it's in the Pacific or something like that, where all the stuff accumulates.
Okay.
And it's out there, and they can. And I want to say that somebody has actually built it.
I love that.
But it was a high school kid that came up with it. It's like anybody can figure this stuff out. You just have to do it. Personally, I mean, Cindy and I we're trying to use less plastic.
Okay.
Ziploc bags and plastic at the grocery store. We use the reusable bags.
Sure.
And it's probably made out of plastic, but we're using it over and over and over again instead of one time throw it out or 3 times throw it out.
Yeah.
The plastic water bottle. We haven't bought a plastic water bottle in years and years now. But just that kind of stuff, we try to reuse the plastic that we have. We try to reuse it whatever we can. Reusable, like we have a big thermos cup instead of a bunch of water bottles.
Yes.
Or reusable grocery bags. I mean, it's not a huge amount of things. We're not, as much as I would like packaging for products to change. I mean, I live in reality. It's probably not going to change a whole lot. Hopefully things change and, companies become, businesses for profit, and I get it.
Yeah.
So there's got to be that. But if we can figure out how to, all I can do is try to read my footprint.
That makes sense.
I always laugh at it. It's like I drive a hybrid car, but it's not really a hybrid. I mean, it's got an electric engine, but come on.
Yeah.
Well,
it's less gas then.
It is.
Yes.
And I've actually read and watched stuff about hybrid cars too. And the problem is we're in the infancy of it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And the battery technology is like, okay, well, we got to figure out how to build and dispose of these batteries. And that can be just as bad as a gas burning engine. So, I mean, we're kind of trading the carbon footprint one for another with the goal that it's going to eventually succeed.
Yeah.
Right. It's cool. And that's why I support it and I'm cool with it. But I think at this point in our lives, at this point in the technology, we're still sort of fooling ourselves. I think we're still pretty equal, but difference being we're future looking versus
That's a big
status
difference,
quo.
though. Yeah, future looking and moving in that direction. I think.
Yeah,
is good.
so I think it's worth it, but it all starts with whatever we're individually doing, what we throw away, all that kind of stuff. So between Cindy and I, we just try to, we take a look at the things we're doing. We're like, well, that's kind of wasteful. There is actually an alternative to that, and we just have to learn how to do it that way.
Yeah.
Like, okay, cool, I can do that.
Yeah.
Small changes.
I like that. Is there a way that we as artists can work together and help one another and maintain our creativity and our own vision for our journey?
I think more people like Danny ought to be out here doing stuff like this, and 100%, honestly. It's about that network.
Yeah.
So what I think that we need to be able to do is just get out of our own heads, get out of our own ways, and say, you know what, if somebody, like I said before, if somebody asks me about video, I'm going to say, look, this is my particular skill set, and this is what I can offer, and I know a guy who does kick-ass video. So if you want a videographer, I've got a guy for you, and then, a musician or something like that. It's like, well, if you need somebody that can play funk bass, I enjoy it. I want to be able to play it, but no, I can't slap and pop and all that kind of stuff. I can fake it not well. Right. So I'm not a funk bassist. So the idea is that through our network, just be a little bit selfless. Right. It's like, yeah, well, I would love to have that gig, but I'm not the right guy for it. But I know a guy. Let me hook you up with somebody who can do that. Yeah. And be cool about it.
I like that. All right. Are there any questions I should have asked you that I have not?
Ah, man, we covered a lot of stuff.
We did. Huh? This is the longest interview I've done.
Oh, no.
It's the 9th one, and it's 3.5 hours.
Yeah, I don't think. Wow. Okay. I don't think anybody would ever say that I don't talk a lot.
No, you have a lot of good things to say, though.
Yeah, I can't think of anything that I want to cover or say or anything. Okay. Just be cool to each other. That's all.
I like that. And then, can you tell folks where they can find you for your different bands, for your photography, and anything else that you would like to share?
Yeah, so I have a website for photography. My website's actually crashed. I'm rebuilding it right now. Stupid hackers. But it's www.pbrownphotography.com. And then I'm on Facebook, the same P Brown Photography. I have a page, and then, of course, I have my personal page, and there's photos all over the place. And then on Instagram, it's the same. It's P Brown Photo. It's either P Brown Photo or P Brown Photography on Instagram also. I try to keep it as same as I can, so it's easy to find. But my watermark is on all of them, so you can tie them all together easy. And then if you want to contact me, it's paul@pbrownphotography.com. That's my email. And then for the bands, Bad Ellie is the pop punk band originals that I'm involved in. And that's badellyband.com or badellyband.rocks, ROCKS. Both of those will get to it. And then we're also on Facebook and Instagram. Again, is Bad Ellie Band on both of Facebook and Instagram. Okay. The Dokken tribute is called Breaking the Chains after their first album. That's also on Facebook and Instagram. We don't have a website for that one yet, but on Facebook and Instagram, it's Breaking the Chains tribute. So we're building up both of those. Bad Ellie, we're working on new songs and recording. And then with Breaking the Chains, we're always working on new songs there too, not our own original stuff. Okay. We're playing Hairfest, and then we're playing in some casino shows, and it ought to be pretty fun. We're having a good looking summer. So excellent.
That's cool. Well, I will put links in the show notes so people can check out your different media platforms and things and photography. Right. And I thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. This has been fun.
Thank you for sharing your art with us, Paul.
Yeah, for sure.
Continued luck and success.
I'm back at you.
Thank you.
We've been friends for a long time, so let's do it.
All right. Sounds good. Find out more at artmedianorthwest.com. ARTMediaNW.com.